Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Tim Errickson. I am the artistic director of the Boomerang Theater Company, and I have the great pleasure today of talking to Vince Gatton, actor, playwright extraordinaire. Hello, my friend.
Hello, how are you?
I am good. I'm going to read Vince's bio so you all have a sense of who this wonderful person is. Vince Gatton is a playwright, including the winner of the Sam French Off-Broadway Festival. He has a play named Alexandria, which premiered at the Sanguine Theater Company's Project Playwrights Festival. He is also a Drama Desk nominated actor for David Johnson's Candy and Dorothy. With Boomerang, he's appeared in To Fool the Eye and Taylor Mack's The Hot Month, and his play Wake had a reading as part of the First Flight Festival in 2019, when we all were able to get back in rooms and be together. So quite a string of things you've got going on, my friend.
Well, yeah, I mean, just so everybody knows, you know, when Tim asks you for these little things, he gives you a word limit because he doesn't want you going all Faye Dunaway and giving you like a 4-page like discursion of everything you've ever done in your whole life. And when he actually, the word count he actually sent me, I basically got out half a sentence, and he was like, you know, maybe we can say a little bit more than that.
You say a little.
So it's teaching me a little something about how the rest of us must write bios, because dang, y'all, we will go on and on.
You know, I'm excited to have you here because of all the success you've had as a writer, on top of your success as an actor, but the success as a writer has come along so recently, and I'm so excited about that transition, and especially for people who have had success in particular avenues of the industry, right? You as an actor, I was a director, you know, other people have been actors or writers, and then transition into the next thing of their lives, or the complementary thing to their lives. And so yeah. I always find that that's fascinating.
Well, I mean, it is interesting because I am not a young man, but I am a young playwright. Like, that aspect of life is new. I'd say like in the last 7 years is something that I've just barely started at. So it makes me feel very good to hear you describe them as all these successes. And but I do have what's good is when I first started to stick my toe into it, sort of went like, oh, I wrote this little thing, like, let's see, maybe it's any good. That very first little 10-minute thing was a finalist for a national playwriting award from City Theater in Miami. And it was just this little external validation that went, oh, okay, so that at least meant, you know, gave you a little bit of boost to keep trying. And so the first full length I wrote also ended up getting to semifinalist or finalist in a whole lot of things. And so it was nice to have some early wins, if not outright wins, at least. Like, I think there's something healthy about getting like close on several things with early work, because I think it encourages you to like, oh, you've got something going on. You've got a voice worth hearing, or you understand something about dramatic structure or characters, or you know that there's enough going on there that you don't get cocky, but you do at least have something telling you you're not foolish to be pursuing this. So yeah, that was good.
It's interesting to me too. Did you study writing at any point?
Not really. I mean, I guess I had a playwriting class in high school, but you know, mostly it's just, I think when you're an actor who, I think a lot of it comes from doing a lot of new work as an actor, and I think some of the value add I brought to development work just as an actor was, I think I had a decent dramaturgical sense. And so I found that even when I wasn't necessarily right for a character, I would often get asked to do developmental readings and workshops and things like that, because writers found me a valuable voice in the room when they would open discussion up to the actors. And I felt like that hones your dramaturgical brain to a pretty good extent. I mean, if that is part of your skill as an actor, after a while you start to think, maybe I could try to generate something as well as just sort of helping mold it. So it was not something I studied. I am not. I mean, the School of Hard Knocks, Tim. That's where I learned my writing.
But you've also worked with some tremendous playwrights as an actor, and I would imagine that osmosis just sort of sunk in. You know, we read off some of your credits, like Taylor Mack. I know you worked with Colleen on a Jeffrey Hatcher play. Like,
yeah, and I've done a couple of Jeffrey Hatcher adaptations, so I haven't tried my hand at adaptation writing-wise yet. But like, you can't but not be impressed by his particular skill at adaptation. But David Johnston is a playwright who I've done a lot of his stuff, and probably the single biggest influence on what I write, just because his combination of humor and grotesquerie is deeply appealing to me. He is a million times funnier than me and a million times more capable of breaking your heart all at the exact same time. But it helped me sort of understand what my voice was when I came to understand, like when I knew what my taste was as an actor and as an audience. A thing that has always appealed to me about David's ability was the way he didn't ask you as an actor to choose between playing the dramatic aspect of a particular line, moment, or scene or play versus funny. Like, there's not really a decision to be made between playing it for laughs or playing it for dramatic truth. His writing so beautifully rides this razor line of being both hilarious and awful. And that you, the actor, are at your best doing his stuff when you do not make such a choice, right? You just play the truth of it super hard. And I think it's a good rule in general for actors. You know, when you start playing for a laugh, you tend to be less funny. But his writing just brings that principle into really strong relief. And so I think that is, as an influence, is something that has bled into my stuff, which I was at a conference, a playwrights conference years ago in Miami, and Marsha Norman was the keynote speaker. And she was talking about, she said, just, you know, I'm sure she's given this speech a million times, but it was filled with these great little nuggets, these great little insights. And one of them was, you don't like self-define what your thing is, but after a while, after a body of work creeps up, you start to figure out what your thing is. And she was like, mine's Trapped Girl. And we all were like, huh? And she's like, you know, Trapped Girl. Like, everything's got a theme of like Trapped Girl, you know. She's like, Night Mother, getting out, literally. And at the time, she was the book writer on the musical of King Kong, which she did not stay as the book writer on, but she was working on that. And she was like, I'm working on King Kong right now. Trapped Girl. She was like, it's a theme in you know what I write. Yeah. And recently it was my husband who identified my theme for me. He was like, oh, you write about trauma. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, everything you write, it either happens during the play or it happened before the play, but like terrible things happen to people in the worlds you create. And I was like, oh, that's true. Oh, yeah. That's true. Hopefully they're still funny, but yeah. So anyway, lessons from Marsha Norman.
That's fantastic. How have you been hanging during this whole quarantine, tumultuous summer time? Like, how has it been for you?
You know, it's been fine, you know, relative to a lot of the world. I think creatively, the first few months were kind of a dead zone. And I realized, though, that as I say that, that wasn't entirely true. Like in the first week after the shutdown, I got contacted about a call for scripts that now is like a whole genre of the Zoom play, right? Like that they've proliferated like crazy. But in that first week, it was sort of this flash emergency, like people are trying to teach from home, teachers and students need material that isn't, you know, just regular scene work. Working on Zoom is not working for us. It's crap. And and it would be cool to work on material that was written for this. So that was still a very fresh new notion and a fresh new kind of prompt to try to work from. And so I realized in that first week, I cranked out a short Zoom play that has been done quite a bit over the last few months. The writing of it took 2 days, but it's gotten done at a lot of university and high school levels, and it's had one sort of professional production as well. And then a small theater company in Louisville, which is where I'm from, had been thinking of doing a reading series. They've been around for many, many years, but we're just going to add a reading series, and then COVID, shutdowns happened. And so they were like, well, maybe we do a Zoom reading. Again, this was early on, so that idea was still sort of, how do we do that? Can we do that? And they had approached me about doing a Zoom reading of my play, Alexandria. And that ended up happening in June, which was, I talk about it being this dead time creatively, but it was really great because I think of that as dead because I wasn't generating a lot of new material, but I did get to go through a whole rehearsal process with this company, Bunbury Theater Company in Louisville. As they rehearsed Alexandria, I got to be sort of in the room for that a lot. And that had its premiere at Sanguine, and it has been done, but it was neat to work on it with a new group of people. And that script in particular, which takes place in the Deep South, I've always been sort of interested about how that script would land differently with people from closer to that region than the New York audiences would have. So I've always liked the idea of somebody getting to do it in Louisville, because it's a play about some culture war issues, and in Manhattan, the audiences are a little more securely on one side of those issues, and received some of the other characters in the play in a very specific way. And I thought it would be really interesting to see how that stuff lands in a place like Louisville, which is not quite the South, has a lot of, where people are more accustomed to navigating their work relationships, their friendships, their where there can be, the cultural divide is right in your nose every day and every minute. And how you navigate that is just a different thing there than I think it is in New York. So I was very eager to have that happen and to see how these actors handled it. And so that was actually a real, while it wasn't generating a new piece, it was spending some time rehearsing, and they ended up doing a really great job of it. And it was exciting for them because, there's this small theater in Louisville who, if they had done a reading in person, I don't know, 40 or 50 people might have been there, but they ended up with like hundreds who viewed it. They had people in California, and as far away as Ireland, there were people who were watching this live stream of this reading. And so that was very cool, just because they got to try this new form. They got to do this play that they dug, and they got an audience out of it from people who didn't know they existed before. And so that was one of the nice things about this, where suddenly there are obviously a million things that are negatives about not being able to rehearse together and not being able to do what we do the way we normally do it. Acting through a little tiny box on your phone is not optimal. But the breaking down of geography has been an interesting development, that you can have a cast working together across time zones and an audience halfway around the world getting to see that work is, it's a little silver lining.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah. And so, in the last probably 6 weeks, I don't know there's been a click or a shift or something. And so suddenly I'm doing a lot more writing again. And that may coincide with the fact that I've also started doing a few more actor play readings again. Just like I've had more stuff I can log in and do, generally one-off stuff, and often not even for an audience, but just it's like, oh, right, these muscles exist. Like I haven't completely forgotten how this goes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, in the last few weeks, I've got started writing, found some old stuff I'd abandoned and thought, I might as well finish that up,
Those are always
Um,
fun. You pull something out and you're like, oh, this is 35 pages of something I wrote 4 years ago.
Well, and also, I think one of the big things is I think for the first several months of this, first it's just like the state of fear you're living in. Like you just are, there's too much else to be, for me, there was too much else to be consumed with of concern for family, concern for friends. We were in week 2 of this when a young, otherwise healthy friend just died. And attended our first Zoom funeral and Zoom shiva, and that is just not how the world should be. So there just was a lot of like, we don't know how long this is going to go on. We don't know when this is going to end. We don't know how it ends, and I don't know what world I'm writing to. I don't know when we're producing again. I don't know what I'm going to care about when this is over. Was a big obstacle to generating anything new. And so there was something about like low risk, about finding something that had been started and abandoned and going, oh, well, I still don't know if this is going to be anything the world's interested in when this is over, but the least I can do is finish this thought. And then that let me finish the other thought. And then there was another thought that turned out I had dismissed as being invalid in the world because of events of 2020 that I kind of turned sideways and went, oh, that's not invalid after all. And so in the last few weeks, it's been, I've had this weird new rush of like cranking out new stuff.
That's
it
awesome.
may all end up being junk, but it's flowing again. And that is its own reward right now.
I think it'll be interesting too when we get the chance to look back at some of the things that were written during this time and sort of see how they characterized the moment that they were written in, right? Whether it's things that are laced with anxiety or things that are laced with righteousness or things that are laced with out with the old, in with the new, like what's going to, I was thinking, I said to Sarah the other day, like 10 years from now, we're going to look back at the playwriting that happened in 2020 and half of it will be on Zoom. We're designed for Zoom and we may never do those plays again because we'll be theoretically. Or maybe we'll have Zoom festivals of things that we only, that it's going to be such an interesting demarcation point of how we lived, how we created, and an interesting sort of portal into history and how we look back on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it will turn out to be ephemera, right? Like, it'll just be like, this was extremely righteous or captured something very real about that specific moment. And that's interesting for what it is. But I think there are other things that will have, that may stand up as we step back and see, like you said, from a distance, like that captures the anxiety without being tied too specifically to the historical moment. But I think that will be fascinating. And what I was saying earlier about geography, and I think it'll be interesting to see if once people are gathering in theaters again, and will we find that we have an allergy to this kind of work? Will we just be like, that is a memory of a dark time, I don't want to look at any more squares on a screen ever again? And put it in a box and stick it in a museum, we're done? Or will some of the ways people are playing with this form, will somebody innovate something along the way that becomes something that does last? Or will we have, depending on how long it goes, will we have trained ourselves with how we watch? Because as I said, there are ways that it can, where geography breaks down, where you can have actors in 2 different cities and an audience in another place. Like, maybe we will decide we don't want to throw that baby out with the bathwater, and new forms get made in 2020 that do linger. We'll see.
Yeah. So when you're writing, when you're finding things or getting back to the keyboard somehow, are there things that you have to have as part of your process to sort of get the juices flowing? Do you like to write at night or the morning? Like, what's it look like when you're working on stuff?
I'm deeply undisciplined. Deeply undisciplined. Because, and maybe if I'd gone to school and learned how to do this, I would have more of those structures in place. But, when I started writing, it was just sort of on the down low. I didn't even tell anybody I was doing it. I worked on my first full length for like 2 years in dribs and drabs without ever telling anyone that I was trying to write something. So it was like low risk, right? Like if it was terrible, who cares? No one would ever see it but me. But it meant you just sort of wrote, any writing I did around my real life. And that is still sort of how I am. I find that the muse is very hard to grasp. Like I can't make it obey me. I can't order it to show up. It has to just show up, which means for me in regular life, pre-COVID life, if I had like blocked off time to get some writing done, I might stare at a screen and crank out some 4 or 5 terrible sentences. And then when I would give up and walk to the subway, the walk to the subway would like shake everything loose. And on the walk to the subway, I would be like, boom, like whole snatches of dialogue would start to happen, or a story problem would solve itself, or and then I would be on the train on my notes app on my phone, just tapping, and then email that to myself so that when I got out of the subway, it would not be lost, and then what I usually do is I have a separate Word document of just notes on whatever script I'm working on. And so then, I dump snatches of dialogue or questions like, well, what if they don't actually do that? What if they only say they will? Or if, X, Y, or Z. And so often I'll work out whole thing, I'll just dump stuff in there. And then whenever it's good enough, it then goes into the actual script. I found that in general, if I physicalize, as I walk, as I shower, as I do dishes, I'm recovering from a back injury, so I don't do much running. But like back when I was running a half marathon, every spring I would do a half marathon, and training runs were where I got a lot of writing done. So for me, I don't have a schedule or a process exactly, but I do know that when I'm small stuck, going for a walk or doing some other activity, physicalizing usually shake some stuff loose.
Yeah, showers for me are always it. Showers and exercise.
Yeah, weirdly, doing dishes, I have discovered, is something of an extension of the shower principle.
Yeah,
warm running water, and not thinking about writing while warm running water happens. You'll be like, oh. Because look, a lot of writing, in the last 6 years, there will be times Miller will look over to me and I'll be like this. And he'll be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, writing, I guess. That writing doesn't always look like this. Yeah. Writing sometimes looks like this.
Yeah.
And honestly, more of it looks like this. What sucks is when you just aren't having any moments where that happens. Yeah. But it really, you can be doing a lot of working stuff out, not in front of the keyboard. And that's been sort of nice in the stuff I've come back to in the last several weeks. Is many of these are old notions or things that I kind of tried to grip earlier, and because I kind of let them go, they've been simmering back there, and so now they're all starting to sort of be like, oh, I think I'm ready to taste you. And
you think that you were, as a writer, just gripping them too tightly?
I think to some degree, gripping them too tightly or trying to make them birth them too soon.
Yeah.
uh, some just needed to like sit down for a while and come back and be like, oh, this doesn't need a major rewrite. What it means is a small change structurally that sheds the whole thing in a different light. But like you need some distance to look at it and see that. So currently, a lot of the things I am doing right at this moment all are part of this sort of larger. It's this larger thing, right? Like I wrote a play, like I guess it was 5 years ago now, that was in the LIC Short Play Festival, the Secret Theater, and it, you know, that's a competition thing, and my play ended up winning, and it was called Jam, and it was an absurdist workplace comedy, kind of a vicious, but hopefully, you know, very funny workplace comedy, and it ends with kind of an incident happens. I refer to it as a diabolus ex machina that happens at the end of that play. But since then, several other plays that I've written, initially one short play and then another entire full length, all have a connection to that incident that ends Jam. And now that has sort of built itself out into a larger project of 9 pieces of various different lengths and different genres and different settings that all sort of exist in the same universe and all have some connection, either very directly or very indirectly, to the incident that happens at the end of Jam. And so a lot of what I've come back to, a lot of the writing I'm doing in the last couple of weeks is filling out what some of the other 9 pieces are and getting those that have been at various stages, sort of scooting them along to a finished first or second draft stage. And, you know, and partly because I think some of the freedom of doing that right now is that that's an unwieldy beast, right? Like Jam is about a 20-minute play, but there's another that's a full length that is probably the most directly connected to it, in that it happens, the end of Jam, the beginning of this other full length called You Have Earned Bonus Stars. That play starts seconds after the end of Jam at the same place where Jam occurs. Like, it is effectively a sequel, and it's a full length. And all the rest of these are sort of 10 to 20 minutes. This 9-play thing is not something anyone can ever produce as one piece, right? Like, it's impractical. Like, it isn't a thing that, you know, but it's like, but partly it's when you're like, nothing's going to get produced anyway, so nothing's happening right now anyway, so you might as well write your impractical thing, right? And I think maybe some of that is why the lid came off, was this sort of like, who cares right now? Like, you're not writing toward a production goal. Like, sometimes the new play development and submission circus is, you know, you can try not to, but it's hard not to start to get influenced by what the calls for scripts are asking for, and to sort of tailoring what you're going to do to try to sort of fit the market and, you know, there is something that is freeing about letting go of those notions in a time when production future is such an uncertainty. So the writing can sort of happen a little more purely for its own sake. Yeah. And then, you know, later we'll sift through it all and see what's...
Yeah. That's future Vince's problem. That's not...
Yeah, exactly. Like, plus, you know, the odds of, you know, it's such an absurdly, there's such an absurdly long odds anyway, you know, about how much gets written versus how much ever gets produced. I think there's something that has been good for my life as a playwright, is the 40 years of being an actor first sort of inures you to rejection and hope. Just that, you know, obviously you want things, you have ambition for, you love the things you write, and you want them to see the light of day, and you want people to love them, and you want people to care. But you also know, you know, so does every other writer out there, and tons of us. And the steady diet of rejection and disappointment that is the actor's life, you know, expanding into being a playwright, it's just like, oh, good. I just have a whole new way of being told no.
Yeah.
You know, but it does make it easier. You know, I know a lot of, you just sort of like, oh, right, this is how the numbers just are what they are. And so you got to do it for other reasons. And,
have you thought about writing for other mediums? Has anybody ever approached you about writing for television or film or anything?
Well, nobody has asked, but
I'm sure the phone is ringing right now if it weren't on you know, airplane mode. It would be.
But B, well, yes, but B, you know, because I don't, I do, as much TV and film as I consume, which is a lot, I don't have the same sort of gut instinct for structure or what's effective. That's a thing I would feel like I need to study before I would know if I have anything I want to say there, just because I don't have the same, you know, my path to being a writer of plays was one that was sort of formed by being an actor on stage and getting a sense of like what a moment is, what makes an effective moment, what makes an effective payoff, what's a useful setup, and on camera stuff is just it's built differently, and I know good when I see it, but I haven't ever really applied my analytical brain to figuring out why. So it's something I feel like I would have to, that's one where like my School of Hard Knocks approach to being a writer would need some more knocking around.
Well, it seems to me that, you know, those pieces that kind of all spiral off of jam in a way would be something sight unseen that could lend themselves easily towards short films or web.
They could indeed. Thank you for that idea.
So I mean, like, you know, I feel like one of the things we're figuring out as we go through this is, since there isn't going to be theaters for a while, you know, maybe another year, what are the things we can do when we can at least get in person with each other to feel like we're making things that others can see, that, and maybe they can see that they're on their own time, you know, like a 20-minute, you know, short is just as fulfilling for the creators and the audience as you know, being able to get into a theater for, you know, a one-act festival or something. They're not exactly analogous, but we're finding substitutes, you know.
Yeah, you know, that Zoom play I wrote, that short, it's called Protocols, and you know, there have been students who've sent me links where they've put their final performance of it up on Zoom, and there was this one sort of professional production of it, and it's it is pretty gratifying, you know, when that's baked into the premise, like watching, you know, it's like, you know, just anytime when you see people do your stuff and you're like, oh look, oh yeah, they really nailed that. That's an odd choice. Like, you know, I mean, you get the full gamut of all of that, but yeah, some of these, like as I said, they jump about a little bit in genre. So some of these would require a bit more production than others, but there are a few that have where the production aspect of it would be simple enough to do even in this world we're currently living in. So.
Yeah.
I recently, I'm a big reader, just of novels. I read a lot of fiction, and the last 3 books I read all happened to use the same device. They were the 3 new books by 3 authors I have read in the past and I really like. One is David Mitchell. He wrote Cloud Atlas, is sort of his most big put him on the map thing, but he's got a new book called Utopia Avenue. Hilary St. John Mandel, who wrote Station 11, has a new book out, and it's called The Glass Hotel. And a guy named Paul Tremblay has a new one called Survivor Song. He wrote Ghosts in the Head and Cabin at the End of the World. And interestingly, all 3 of them, there are characters that appear in these 3 new novels of theirs that are from other books of theirs. these some brief cameos, but significant. Some of them, all three of them have at least one or two that have significant plot, like stage time and plot influence. And they're people from these other, like, books you read 10 years ago, showing up in this new novel. And this sort of, with David Mitchell, it's unsurprising. Like, everything he's written seems to exist in this giant meta universe. So, I mean, of course, he does it more than the others do. But it's fascinating to be almost to the end of The Glass Hotel and suddenly realize, oh, wait a minute, those people are from Station 11. I know them already. And as a reader, I'm totally jazzed by that. And I just thought it was an odd coincidence that I just read 3 books in a row that employ the same device, and then went, oh, and that's exactly what you're doing with the plays you're currently writing. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, here you thought you were doing something innovative, and what you were doing is completely on trend. Like, you're just following the herd.
You've got it. You're tapped in.
I am. I'm super with the zeitgeist.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of, like, to not get too, like, literary, but like those Eugene O'Neill sea plays all used to center around the same, like, 9 guys on a ship. One was a different story of them pulling into port, and they had this problem pulling into, almost like episodic television, except some of them would, focus. If there were 9 guys, let's say, one play would have all 9 of them. The second one would have 3 of them. The third one would have all 9 of them, plus add a 10th guy. And, like, it would shift around in its perspective and its point of view, but it also gave you this sort of all-encompassing world in which these characters existed, and that you could dip into at any point and get a flavor of it, and then expand in any direction if you wanted to. Almost like a choose-your-own adventure in a way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I realize, like, part of this is, I always loved the J.D. Salinger's 9 stories.
Yeah.
It's funny because I consider myself a fan of Salinger, but the one book of his I have not read is The Catcher in the Rye. Which is kind
You're not good at high school? What did you do?
I don't know, man. It passed me by, and then I think there's just an age limit for when that book's really going to grab you, because, like, in my 40s, I may have tried for a second. I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to leave this alone.
But in the 30s, and I was like, I see it, but I don't feel it.
Yeah. But, like, the Franny and Zooey and Raise Had the Roof Beaten Carpenters and like all the ones about the Glass family, I am there for that stuff. And the 9 stories are all about the Glass family in some way. Some of them very overtly. A Perfect Day for Banana Fish is about Seymour, but, like, there are whole stories that sometimes you have to read them twice before you recognize, oh, that reference right there was about the Glass, like, that's Buddy, like, they're talking about, or that's Waker that she's talking about. And I love that. I've always loved that, like, this notion that each of those stories can just stand on their own. They don't form a singular narrative. The characters exist only in that one story. And you have to sort of, I like that you're sort of looking for the thread of, like, why is it in here? Why is this part of the 9? And then the little brain whoosh that you get when you see, oh my God, that boyfriend she's mourning, that was the 4th brother in the, like, that, I mean, like, when you, like, put the things together, I like that little, endorphin rush of, like, oh, I made the connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of underlying, and why this larger project I'm working on, I arbitrarily picked 9. Like, I have 7 plotted out right now, and 6 are written. But I picked 9 just because of, as a little, like, to the 9 stories of J.D. Salinger.
That is awesome. I think it's a fantastic project, especially in this time when we're trying to find things to get us excited.
I mean, and honestly, like, that's part of it too, is just having setting that as a goal, setting that as a structure can, even if, you know, it ends up being 12 or it ends up being 7, you know, like just having this little, that can be the grain of sand around which you start to try to form a pearl, is just having any idea, like, oh, I'll write 9 interconnected pieces. And then you can have fun with, some of them are very direct, as I mentioned, like Jam, you have earned bonus stars is basically a sequel, like it starts seconds later.
Yeah.
But some of them, you've got this whole other story on the other side of the country, completely unrelated people, it seems. And then there's, you know, for the keen-eyed viewer, there's like a, oh, that's who that is, or that's how that connects. And some take place well into the future, and some take place way in the past. And but when you're just sitting around being like, I should be using downtime to write, and I have nothing to write, you know, it was several months of sort of stultifying and feeling like we're in lockdown. Like, this is like being on a retreat. If you're one of those people who is motivated and, you know.
All right, stop that. Nobody's buying that you're not motivated.
Well, it took a while. I'm just saying, I did spend a good several months just being happy for every day I didn't give someone else this illness was the one victory I could say. Like, what did you accomplish today? What I accomplished today was I did not participate in spreading COVID-19. Like, that was, and honestly, for many months, that was enough. That was what my job was. My job is to stay home. And, you know, it's only in the last couple of months that suddenly it's like, I could be doing more with my time than just like treading water.
I think the summer has sort of revealed itself as that motivator as well, right? We get closer to the election, we have more protesting, we have more things, more madness, you know, going on, and things that we're, you know, amped up about.
Yeah, and I think there's something to that point too. Like, I've only really been talking in terms of the pandemic, but history is just, the news flow has been like trying to sip from a fire hose, and you know, it's just the pace of events has been enormous. And if you're engaged with the world at all, which I feel like as an artist you kind of have to be, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming in a way that so much of the I don't know what world we're living in when this is over was not just about like after the illness is under control, but just how is the world different? How are our priorities different? And when, what counts as over, you know, like what way this election goes in November is it's an enormous hinge point in the direction of this country and our culture, and to not be engaged by that is just sort of irresponsible. But it also can lead to just a cycle of just consuming, you know, it can be a sort of negative addiction to just keep hitting the button of rage. There's so much to be legitimately angry about, but it is also easy to fall into, I caught myself reading like 6 different versions of articles on the same outrageous incident and being like, did you gain anything by Article 5 that you didn't already know or agree with in after Article 3? No, you just want to be mad about this. And I have to start trying to limit the intake so that the output can have some space to breathe. And I think for a good chunk of the late spring and summer, it felt like the focus needed to be on being a little more of a passive receiver of what was happening in the world. And so, yeah, lately it's been like, okay, what do I need to know? Got it. Now I'm going to like turn that stuff off and, you know, go get some writing done, you know, turn it off and then do this.
Exactly. When you get stuck, or if you get sort of lost for a second, is there a quote or a piece of advice that anyone's ever given you that you sort of fall back on to either reground yourself or give yourself a little bit of hope and encouragement?
I guess I go back to other
than Marsha Norman and her capacity.
Damn it! Well, I was going to go back to Marsha Norman.
No, please go ahead. She'll love it.
I mean, you know, she does teach this stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, there's just a couple of things, like just remembering everybody who has ever said make friends with your shitty first draft.
Yeah.
Because I get very much I pre-edit, you know, like sometimes when I'm staring in the distance, it's because I'm working through all the critiques of the piece before the piece is even written. Like, but no, but that's a terrible idea because blah, like here's the dramatic flaw in that premise. And it's like, you might need to flesh it out a little more. And you might find a way around that objection, but like my brain is pretty quick with the objections of like why that's not a valid idea to pursue. That's a waste of time because X or Y, or that's not a good story because, and so it's helpful to remind myself that your job is not to get it right on the first draft, it's to get it down. Because then your job can be editor. Then you can look at it and like, it's a lot easier to do once it's something, even if it's a blob of goo, you can start to clean that up. But to go back to Marsha Norman specifically, she also talked about like, she said, get your character up a tree and then throw rocks at it. And I was like, that's interesting. Because sometimes I'll step back and I'll look at because she's like, if your character is up a tree and is comfortably up the tree, like if you haven't put them in a situation, why are we watching? And then she's like, and if you make it too easy for them, why are we watching? So if your character is too comfortable up in that tree, you need to throw bigger rocks or more rocks, or throw them faster. Like you have to throw rocks at them. You love them, but then throw shit at them. Like that's the tension. And so sometimes when I'm going, I don't know why I care. I've written 3 pages of just dialogue, but it's just a conversation. Like I'm pretty good at dialogue. Like I can witty people saying witty things, but like, you know, and then I'll just hate it because it's like, there's nothing actually occurring here. And I'll stop and I'll realize, oh, they're just hanging out on that tree limb. Like you haven't thrown any rocks at them. So sometimes it's helpful just for me to be like, what's a bigger rock? So I'll go back to Marsha Norman and think like, what would be a bigger rock I can throw right now?
I think that's great. It reminds me of, I was watching this, the masterclass with Aaron Sorkin, and he was talking about starting projects with character and obstacle. What do you have? Who is it and what do they want and how badly do they want it and what are the problems that they want from getting it? Goal and obstacle, actually. Because he said the exact same thing. If I don't have goal and obstacle, I just have pretty people saying pretty things doing nothing.
Yeah, and another one Marsha dropped, which I just, this is just going to be like an ad for like,
yeah, we're going to put Marsha Norman.
Go study with Marsha Norman. You know, and of course as with all things, like there are countless examples of really successful, like good quality things that break all these rules, but you know, we're just looking for like whatever's going to feed you to continue, right? Like it doesn't have to be provably right or wrong, but she also had a thing that has sometimes served me very well, which was, she was like, this one's very jaded sounding, but she's like, in the first 10 pages, tell me when the play is going to be over. I was like, what does that mean? She's like, listen, everybody's going to be like, you know, not in terms of like, what time do I need to tell the babysitter that I'll be back? But on a less cynical level, like there's a ticking clock.
Yes.
Like, what's the ticking clock? What is the thing that says this is you? And she's like, you know, what's dramatically interesting are decisions often, right? Like, so what's, like, this play will be over when the girl decides which boy she's going to leave the prom with, or, you know, whatever it is. Like, we know early what are we fighting for, and what does resolution look like? You get the girl or you don't get the girl. Like, but that isn't open-ended. Like, tell me what it will look like, what not getting the girl looks like. She marries the other guy, or, you know, he falls off a cliff. Like, oh, we're walking along a cliff. Do we fall or do we get to the other side? You know, but the audience then, she was like, there's something useful in, because then everything is sort of structured toward you. They and you are mentally writing toward a point that is definable about what it, when this story concludes. And even if you break it, even if you can then do whatever you want to do within that form, but it is, and I haven't obeyed that rigorously on everything I've ever written, but there are some stories where it has really helped to be like, oh, for what's this, you know, I've got a first draft of something, and recognizing like this ending, it feels like I'm near something that's effective, near something that's poignant or something, but it's not really landing, and I fiddle with the end a whole bunch and try to rewrite it, or have them say something different, or have an action be different, and then I realize, oh, why that's not landing is I didn't set it up properly at the beginning to say that's when you know this play is over. And so then it's a rewrite, it's a dropping in of 2 words on page 2 or something that lets, you know, if it's in a short piece, it lets like this other 2 words on page 10 make people go, oh, you know, because you set, you know, it's structural stuff like that.
Yeah, mechanism. So it's
the mechanism.
It's round now.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's fantastic. Let me know when this play is over.
Yeah, tell them at the beginning when's the play going to be over. Like, oh, okay. Like what? Because that is so frequently baked into what you were saying about like, what do they want and what's the obstacle? You know, those are sort of givens. Like, you better have a reason to be here. Why are we watching this moment in these people's lives? But also, when's it over? Like, how do I know when, like, 2 people are fighting to make one person make a decision? Well, that tells me, all right, when that person decides, the play's over, or whatever it is. But it just, it sets you up well.
I love it. All right, my friend. Any last words? Anything you want to plug?
Gosh. I want to plug all the things that got canceled. You know, I think, you know what, going back, like, yeah, part of the beginning of this was also just disappointment, just living in disappointment, because I was, a short piece of mine was getting done in LA in April. I was, that play I referred to a few times, You Over in Bonus Stars, was supposed to be premiering at Mad Lab in Columbus in August, and that, of course, was canceled. It's been postponed now to April 2021, so we're going to cross our fingers that the world moves in that direction. But I was supposed to be acting in something in Edinburgh, the Edinburgh Fringe, in August of this year too, so that was one of the first things to go, which now supposedly we're going to do next year. So we'll see about that. But as for things,
we're talking about the things that will come back to them, you know, like when your writing is as good as it is, like these things just don't disappear in smoke. People still want to do them and respond to them and play them. So.
Yeah, you hope. I mean, I guess I do have, you know, right now it's sort of a generating period, not a come see period. But that reading of Alexandria that I mentioned at Bunbury Rep, they did record it, and at some point over the next couple of months, they're going to put that out as a fundraiser and have that streamable for about a week. So once I know what those dates are, I will let you know, and I'll throw that out on all my social media and stuff.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, my friend. I'm always fascinated by talking to people who are smart and thoughtful about things. And
who are they? Please introduce me.
Stop it. And self-deprecating.
Those assholes.
Those assholes. All right, buddy. See ya.
All right. Bye.